Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas joins us now. Senator, good to see you.
Hi,
This
Senator.
question has been circulating for at least a few days now. Should Dr. Fauci either step down or be fired? Our Peter Doocy asked Press Secretary Jen Psaki about that on Friday. Let's listen to the exchange.
Just since you mentioned Dr. Fauci again, can you imagine any circumstance where President Biden would ever fire him?
No.
So you and Senator Rubio and Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee are saying he should be fired. White House appears to have no intention of doing that. What do you say?
Well, I'm reflecting what I heard from so many people across the state of Arkansas last week. They've lost confidence in Tony Fauci because of his repeated evasions and misdirection and politicized advice. That's very clear going back to the earliest days of this pandemic when, for instance, he did, in fact, contrary to his protestations now, dismiss out of hand the prospect that this virus could have originated in the Wuhan labs. We now know that is by far the most likely origin for this virus. Dr. Fauci appears to have focused more on protecting his agency, which was funding research in those labs, and protecting his friends among the Chinese scientists working at those labs than trying to get the truth for the American people.
So
that's why so many Arkansans have lost confidence in him, and it's time for him to go.
So what do you think? Is there enough momentum behind your push with other lawmakers to somehow enact change and see Dr. Fauci actually go?
Well, more and more senators and congressmen are agreeing with the view that it's time for him to go. And I suspect that it's not going to get better with time. Just over the last month, Sandra, Dr. Fauci's explanations in front of congressional committees have been evolving. He's been backpedaling away from his earlier denials that his agency funded research in those labs. In that clip you just played, he's now referring to himself in the third person like a prima donna NFL wide receiver trying to protect his reputation, which has deservedly taken a hit based on his repeated flip-flops and evasions over the last year and a half.
Senator Cotton, Fauci insists that he was following the science, and I think you have to acknowledge that in the early days of the COVID pandemic, the science was evolving fairly quickly. We were learning things literally by the hour, and things would change day to day. That said, there were a lot of contradictions, and that report that was issued by the National Laboratory in Lawrence Livermore back in May on the origins of the COVID virus was pretty much ignored by public health officials.
Yeah, John, I think you have to draw a distinction between what we understood about the virus's impact on the human body and the best ways to counteract it on the one hand, which does change with the new coronavirus. But on the other hand, what we knew about the origins of this virus, none of that has changed from the beginning. From the very beginning, from January of last year, when I first sounded the alarm about this coronavirus, it was clear that the labs in Wuhan were a much more likely source than that ridiculous food market the Chinese communists always pointed to. Dr. Fauci knew that because he can easily read articles in medical journals, or he can see reports like the one you referenced from the Lawrence Livermore laboratories, yet he continued to downplay the labs as a possible origin. We've also seen Dr. Fauci change or acknowledge that he was changing his advice and recommendations, not based on science, but based on what he thought the American people were ready to hear on questions about, say, mask wearing or at what level we would achieve herd immunity. That is why so many Arkansans have lost confidence in him.
Senator, you're calling on him to go, as well as Marco Rubio and Marsha Blackburn, because you believe that he's lost the confidence of the American people. You're pointing to many things that you believe that he did wrong, or in some cases it sounds like you're even saying that he flat out lied to the American people. If that were the case, are you suggesting that he did something wrong, or are you suggesting he did something illegal?
Well, I think we need to investigate further to get to the bottom of exactly what his agency funded in Wuhan, in apparent violation, Sandra, of a directive of the Obama White House not to fund this very dangerous research to make coronaviruses more contagious and therefore more dangerous. I think that's one reason why we've had so many evasive answers over the last year from Dr. Fauci, to include just over the last few weeks to try to protect his reputation and his agency's reputation and all of his friends in those labs in Wuhan. But the American people deserve answers. They don't deserve activists in white lab coats covering up their tracks.
Senator Cotton, I wanted to ask you about this Department of Interior Inspector General's report that came out yesterday about the clearing of Lafayette Park behind me last year when President Trump walked over to St. John's Church, which is just about 100 yards away from where I'm sitting right now. The Department of the Interior is saying it had nothing to do, the clearing of the park with President Trump's walk over there, had everything to do with the fact that they wanted a contractor to put up a non-climb fence. Yet the rhetoric about that whole episode directed toward President Trump was off the charts. Now that we have seen this official report come out, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, it's not surprising that the Attorney General last year wanted to clear Lafayette Park and erect that fencing. I mean, you had major riots happening in Washington, D.C., trying to burn that very church you just mentioned, just across the street from where the president lives with the nuclear codes. You also had the rioters trying to tear down statues in that park as well. Attorney General Barr said from the very beginning that they were trying to erect the fencing for those reasons, not for some photo op. Unfortunately, it's not surprising that the liberal media lied about the rationale for clearing that park, and not surprising that the liberal media spread that lie for the last year. Of course, the president and the vice president did as well. They might want to go back and recount what they had said last year in the heat of the campaign.
Speaking of former President Obama, while we have you here, Senator Cotton, I wanted to play this sound for you, former President Obama, on critical race theory as this debate in our schools continues across the nation. Listen to a bit of this. We'll get your reaction.
Lo and behold, the single most important issue to them apparently right now is critical race theory. Who knew that was the threat to our republic?
He seems to be dismissing the concerns over this push in our schools.
Yeah, well, President Obama was a college professor who wrote 2 memoirs about himself before he turned 50. So it's not surprising that he doesn't think this is a problem. But you know who it is a problem for? Parents whose kids are coming home indoctrinated to hate our country or believe it's an evil place, or the hundreds of troops that I have heard from who have sent whistleblower complaints about the kind of anti-American divisive training that's been pushed down from the top of the Department of Defense over the last 6 months. Now, I'm glad we just had Secretary of Austin in front of the Armed Services Committee today say that no troop should be exposed to that, but there are a lot of Americans who are genuinely concerned that we are teaching our children and teaching our troops to hate America, to believe that it is a fundamentally and inherently evil and racist place that has no place in our schools or our military.
Well, as we saw just a few minutes ago, the state of Florida becoming the latest state to ban the teaching of critical race theory and other courses like it. Senator Tom Cotton, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you both.
Senator, thank you. Back